It was supposed to be a flight from Ahmedabad to London in an aircraft that was described as uncrashable. But for 240 people on board Air India 171, it became a harrowing journey to death, and the tragedy did not end there. The burning wreckage of Boeing Dreamliner fell on a medical college, claiming another 75 lives. So what failed? Technology or technique? Man or machine? Those answers, as of now, are all hidden in the black box. But what is visible is the devastating impact of this biggest ever aviation tragedy in India.
That's 1179 at the approach, cross 28 left, runway 28 right. Runway 28 right, last flight.
18 seconds that saw Air India Flight 171 with 230 passengers and a 12 crew on board turn into a huge ball of fire. Raging flames that have engulfed almost everyone on board. Each survivor would be a miracle in itself. The flight that took off for London at 13:38 p.m. crashed within 5 minutes into a civilian area. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation has said that the pilots issued a mayday call before losing contact. The aircraft crashed just minutes later.
एकदम से आवाज आया, भूकंप जैसा लगा, बाहर आया तो धुआं धुआं, मालूम नहीं था मेरे प्लेन केस हुआ, ऐसा मालूम नहीं था। फिर यहाँ पे आए, फिर मालूम था। यहाँ के प्लेन केस हुआ है, बॉडी बहुत सारी बड़ी है।
मैं एक्चुअली अहमदाबाद से पुणे जा रहा था बाय इंडिगो। जब बोर्डिंग हुआ तब मैं अंदर फ्लाइट के अंदर वॉक करते जा रहे थे, बट सामने बहुत बड़ा धुआं वगैरह दिख रहा था। बट उस टाइम मुझे ये नहीं मालूम था वो प्लेन क्या है, जैसे कोई आग झाड़ी हुए वगैरह जंगल में आग लगती है ना।
ऑफिस से बाहर निकला तो मैंने देखा कि आवाज जोर से आवाज आया विंग्स का, फिर पूरा धुआं धुआं भर गया। लोग यहाँ से भगदड़ मची। उसके बाद आके देख रहे थे ये हादसा की स्थिति। आने के बाद देखा कि पूरा मलबा बिखरा हुआ, आग लगी है, पूरा धुआं गुब्बारा है, कुछ भी दिखाई नहीं दे रहा, समझ में नहीं आ पा रहा था क्या है।
The blazing wreckage hit a medical college building. Plates of uneaten food lay scattered in the hostel dining hall, showing the moment frozen, even as parts of aircraft jutted through the building. This is the first ever crash for a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, a model that had an immaculate safety and reliability record. Only an investigation can now reveal what exactly led to India's biggest ever aviation tragedy involving a single aircraft. For now, families are left counting their losses.
कितने लोग थे अंदर?
तीन।
कौन था अंदर?
वो हमारा भाई है, वो भाई की बेबी है, भतीजी है मेरी।
वो भी
साथ में 6 साल की है।
अभी उनका कुछ पता चल पाया?
नहीं, कुछ भी नहीं।
मेरी बहन, मेरा सिस्टर दोनों है अंदर, और हमको जाने नहीं दे रहे, सारे रास्ते ब्लॉक कर दिए हमारे इधर से। पर इधर आते आते तो 1-1.5 घंटा तो रोड पे घूमते रहे, बोलते हैं इधर मत खड़ी रखो, इधर खड़ी मत रखो। अरे हम यहाँ हमारे परिवार को देखने आए, घूमने नहीं आए।
अंदर तो खाली મને એટલા સમાચાર તો જોઈએ કે ના અહીંયા છે કશું નહીં, હું કોઈ ખબર ખાલી એટલું તો કહી શકે ને મને કે એમને કઈ તકલીફ નથી, તો અમે જાણે બેહી જઈશ સાથે.
Most experts we spoke to say that the odds of such a tragedy happening with this aircraft are 1 in a million. But this is a harsh reality for each one of those who lost their lives and loved ones. It is definitely the Dreamliner's darkest hour.
We also have some breaking inputs coming in. 240 passengers on board that aircraft have been reported dead, while 2 passengers have survived. It was a miraculous escape for them. We're also given to understand that 75 deceased are from the medical college. Remember, the aircraft hit a building. The wreckage hit a building. 75 medical college students are reported dead, while 45 are from the medical college who have been hospitalized. Hiten is joining us on the broadcast with more details. Hiten, आप जानकारी मिल रही है कि केवल यात्री जो इस एयरक्राफ्ट में मौजूद थे वही नहीं, बल्कि बिल्डिंग में जो लोग थे उनमें से 75 लोगों की मौत हो गई है। ये मेडिकल कॉलेज के थे और 45 लोग ऐसे हैं जिनका इलाज चल रहा है इस वक्त।
बिल्कुल, देखिए 45 अभी भी हॉस्पिटलाइज है, लेकिन इन 6 हॉस्टल्स में सिर्फ रेसिडेंशियल डॉक्टर्स अकेले नहीं बल्कि वो अपने फैमिली मेंबर्स के साथ रहते थे। कोई छोटी बच्ची भी उनके साथ थी। हालांकि अभी ऑफिशियल फिगर अभी आना बाकी है, लेकिन जो एज पर सिविल हॉस्पिटल के सोर्सेज ये बताया जा रहा है कि इन 7 बिल्डिंग्स में से 75 डेड बॉडी को रिकवर किया गया है और बाकी इस प्लेन में जो मौजूद थे वो 240 लोगों की डेथ हो गई है, जिसमें गुजरात के एक पूर्व मुख्यमंत्री विजय रूपानी भी थे, जिनका कंफर्मेशन CR पाटिल ने खुद किया। 2 लोग सरवाइव कर चुके हैं प्लेन के, एक ब्रिटिश नागरिक बताया जा रहा है और एक इंडियन नागरिक है जो दीव का रहने वाला है। दोनों इस वक्त ट्रॉमा सेंटर में इलाज करा रहे हैं। ये मैं आपको तस्वीर दिखाऊं, ये देखिए प्लेन के कॉकपिट की तस्वीर है। यहाँ पर अभी भी ब्लैक बॉक्स को लेकर सर्च ऑपरेशन जो है वो लगातार चल रहा है और ये बाकी का जो हिस्सा आप देख रहे हैं वो बाकी पूरा प्लेन का हिस्सा है। आप देखिए सीट वगैरह सब कुछ पूरी तरह से जल के राख हो चुका है। और अगर मैं आपको एक और तस्वीर अगर मैं आपको दिखा पाऊं तो सामने की तरफ अगर आप बिल्डिंग पर देखेंगे तो अभी भी वहां पर आपको आग की लपटें दिखेगी। उसी बिल्डिंग के बैक साइड पर प्लेन का जो बैक साइड का टेल एरिया है वो लटका हुआ है। जो जानकारी मिल रही है उस हिसाब से इसी रूट से प्लेन आ रहा था। 1:38 पर प्लेन ने यहीं से उड़ान भरी थी। यहीं से 1 किलोमीटर की दूरी पर अहमदाबाद इंटरनेशनल एयरपोर्ट का रनवे है। उड़ान भरते ही वो CCTV तक सामने आया है कि वो अचानक किसी तकनीकी खामी से प्लेन नीचे की तरफ आया। अभी यहाँ से जब कुछ देर पहले प्लेन कुछ और उड़े थे तो वो प्लेन के हिस्से जो है वो देखने मिल रहे थे कि राइट की तरफ मुड़े थे, यानी कि यहाँ से टेक ऑफ करते हुए लेफ्ट की तरफ वो मुड़ते हैं। तो ऐसे में यही एक अंदाजा लगाया जा रहा है कि जब ये प्लेन में तकनीकी खामी आई होगी और थोड़ा नीचे की तरफ आया होगा, उस दौरान वो लेफ्ट की तरफ टर्न वाले मोड़ पे था तो इन इमारतों से वो टकराया होगा और उसके बाद यहीं पर नीचे गिरा पूरा का पूरा और उसके बाद धमाका हुआ और जो आग लगी उसकी तस्वीरें सबके सामने आप देख सकते हैं कि करीब 6 हॉस्टल है बीजे मेडिकल कॉलेज की।
लेकिन वो गलत क्या हुआ? उसमें टेक्निकल फेलियर था, इलेक्ट्रिकल फेलियर था, मैकेनिकल फेलियर था, किसी चीज से टकरा, ये सब जब ब्लैक बॉक्स रिकवर हो जाएगा शायद तब ये जानकारी सामने आए। लेकिन जो 2 सर्वाइवर्स हैं उनके बारे में मैं जानना चाहूंगी आपसे। जाको राखे साइयां मार सके ना कोई, ये इस स्थिति में मैंने देखा कि जब हम बात कर रहे हैं कि 240 यात्री उस प्लेन में जो मौजूद थे जिनकी मौत हो गई, 2 ऐसे थे जिनके लिए इट वाज अ मिराकुलस एस्केप, चमत्कार था ये।
बिल्कुल, देखिए एक बहुत बड़ा चमत्कार है क्योंकि ये 2 पैसेंजर्स, एक ब्रिटिश नागरिक बताया जा रहा है जिसकी सीट जो है 11A थी, इमरजेंसी विंडो के पास, इमरजेंसी डोर के पास, और एक और कोई नागरिक बताया जा रहा है जो दीव का पैसेंजर था जो पीछे की सीट पर बैठा हुआ था। हालांकि जानकारी के ये मिल रही है कि जो ब्रिटिश नागरिक था वो जब प्लेन क्रैश हुआ उसके पहले ही नीचे की तरफ से कूद कर जा रहा है। इस तरीके का वीडियो भी एक सामने आया है, लेकिन अभी किसी भी प्रकार की कोई कंफर्मेशन जो है वो अथॉरिटीज की तरफ से नहीं आई है। हालांकि उसकी जान बची है, एक दीव के नागरिक की जान बची है, दोनों इस वक्त अस्पताल में है। अहमदाबाद पुलिस से लेकर हर कोई उनसे पूछताछ करेगा, उनसे बातचीत भी करेंगे, जानेंगे कि आखिरकार हुआ क्या था। क्योंकि ये जो तस्वीरें हैं अगर आप देखें तो ये तस्वीरें कितनी भयावह है। आप देखिए नीचे की तरफ पूरा का पूरा प्लेन का जो मटेरियल होता है वो आपको दिखेगा। ये जो जलकर सब कुछ राख हो चुका है, सिर्फ इस तरफ नहीं आगे भी है। और ये इमारतें, जिन इमारतों में धमाके के बाद जो आग लगी है, ये उस इमारतों की तस्वीर आप देखिए। पीछे की तरफ तक इमारतों में नुकसान हुआ है। सिर्फ इतना नहीं, आप देखिए यहाँ पर अगर मैं आपको तस्वीर दिखा पाऊँ तो ये जो पार्क की हुई सारी गाड़ियाँ थी ये जलकर पूरी तरह खाक हो चुकी है। मतलब आसपास में आप सोचिए 12 घंटे का फ्यूल इस प्लेन में मौजूद था, तो जब वो गिरा होगा और उसके बाद वो धमाका हुआ होगा तो वो कितना भयावह होगा। क्योंकि
जाहिर तौर पर हितेन, और वो धमाका हमने उन तस्वीरों में देखा भी। फिलहाल आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया इस पूरी जानकारी के लिए। विल ऑफ कोर्स कीप कमिंग बैक टू यू for any update that comes to fore. Thank you very much for joining us. Let me in fact go across to our guest. Let me open up the discussion. And we are joined by Suhail Seth, columnist and someone who was in fact the first Indian on the Global Advisory Board of British Airways. We have Dr. Anand Ranganathan with us on the broadcast. Air Vice Marshal P.K. Srivastav joins me. He's a aviation expert. He's joining me from the studio. We have Captain Saurabh Bhatnagar, former Senior Commander Indigo and former Senior Commander Air India Express. We have Mark D. Martin, CEO, Mark Consulting, and Gaurav Taneja, Flying Beast, also joining us on the broadcast. Let me first come to you, Suhail Seth. When you look at these visuals, you hear the eyewitness account and you go through the details coming to fore, the first thing that happens is that a sense of fear grips you. And of course, then comes the analytical thinking and critical thinking. What is your assessment?
It is obviously a horrific accident. There's no denying that. It is an accident that no one imagined, and that's what accidents are, A. B. To my mind, having worked in the aviation business, I think everyone is becoming an aviation expert and jumping to conclusions. The two pilots who were in charge of the aircraft, one had over 8,000 hours of flying. The other, the first officer, had over 1,100 hours of flying. Three people or three stakeholders have to get involved in this. Number one, the aircraft manufacturer, which in this case is Boeing. Number two, the airline. And number three, the regulator. It is early, Swati. People are jumping to conclusions. Oh, this was not right. This was not right. You know, I'll tell you one thing. No company, no corporation, no airline wants anything of this kind to ever happen. It is heart-wrenching because people lose their lives, families are orphaned, families lose their loved ones. The regulators don't want this because it is a sign, it is a vote of non-confidence in India's aviation capabilities. The pilots of Air India, in every aviation survey, and you've got two experts here, you can ask them, including Anand, Air India pilots have been rated amongst the world's finest. So I'm amazed as to how people are jumping to multiple conclusions for no rhyme or reason. And then you have the Tata Group. You tell me, the Tata Group today is what, about 158 years old, has served the country with reverence, respect, and with diligence and commitment. You saw what happened post 26/11, Swati. Your channel covered it brilliantly. Ratan Tata was standing there right outside the Taj. They set up a fund, they set up a care facility. So my point is, rather than jump immediately to conclusions that this was wrong, that was wrong, this is not right, let's wait for an investigation to happen. This is not the time for fault finding. This is a time for, to my mind, consoling people who've lost their loved ones. This is a time for India to heal. This is not a time for India to accuse, not to be vituperative. You have very senior people involved in all of this. Cut them slack. Let them do their jobs. You know, airline accidents, this is not the first airline accident that has happened. There is a process to an accident. There's an inquiry based on the findings of the black box, based in partnership or in collaboration with the aircraft manufacturer. And then you come to those conclusions. That's what we have to wait for. People are jumping the gun. People are saying, oh, this happened. We think that happened. We don't think this was done, that was done. I mean, I'm amazed as to how in our country, when people need to come together to give solace to families, we are quick to find fault, get into an abusive situation for no rhyme or reason. There are multiple stakeholders involved here, and we must respect both their professionalism and their integrity. And this is not the time, to my mind, to cast vituperative accusations and fly around saying, oh, this was right, this was... Let me tell you, Swati, my wife and my 5.5-year-old child were taking off from Delhi for Kochi this evening when the news of this horrific accident happened. And you know what my wife said? And I salute her courage for that. She says, And when she landed, I spoke to her. She says, we had an excellent flight. And I have to tell you, the pilot and the crew were anguished as they were, but they served with diligence, with commitment, and with care. You know, amongst all the people on the panel, I travel the most. I travel 29 days a month. I know a thing or two about aircraft. And let me tell you, I'm not blowing smoke saying, oh, but Air India. The pilots of Air India, the crew of Air India as an airline, they are magnificent. Don't trash them. Don't say that, oh, you know, this is not right, that is not right.
Right.
You will then sully an entire ecosystem of great people, whether it's the crew, whether it's the engineers, whether it's the pilots. That's my initial submission.
I want to bring in Dr. Ranganathan. Dr. Ranganathan, like I said, you know, earlier, first what happens is that a sense of grief and fear grips you, and then you start thinking, applying your brain, analyzing the situation, assessing what's transpired. I'm not saying that it's unsafe now, nobody's going to travel. Of course, you know, we are going to do that. But everybody at this point of time on an individual level, perhaps recounting a situation, a similar situation if they've ever been into, recounting the worst tragedies that have happened in the history of aviation. Is this just that, an accident, and at the moment we should just wait for the black box to be recovered to get more details? Because the one question that nobody has an answer to and everybody is asking, what went wrong?
Good evening, Swati, and good evening to my fellow panelists. And at the outset, may I please offer my sincere condolences to the families of the bereaved. It really is a dark day for India and for all the affected families. And what can I say? It's truly a tragic day. Couple of points I'd like to make, and I'd like to thank Suhail for that wonderful bit that he spoke about over the last couple of minutes. Very important topic that he raised about the Air India pilots and how let us wait for the conclusions of the investigations that would happen, obviously, in the ensuing months. Couple of points. Number one, of course, Swati, as you very correctly said, it immediately happens as human proclivity after a crash. We believe that, flight is one of the least safest journeys to make. In fact, it is quite the opposite. The safest journey to make is through air. That has been proven. As far as this Dreamliner is concerned, of course, there have been issues with its safety. There was a whistleblower who said that there were issues with cost cutting, and there were things that especially related to hydraulics and whatnot. But the fact remains that there has never been a single Dreamliner crash. There has never been a single wide-body Dreamliner crash. This is the first wide-body crash of an Indian Airlines after 40 years. So it is exceedingly rare. That said, because it is exceedingly rare, I think it is absolutely paramount that we get to the bottom of it. Now, it's very clear, from the video that you've been running, and thank you for airing it. The plane crashed exactly 30 seconds after takeoff. Now, a sudden descent such as this, in fact, there was a Dreamliner that had a sudden descent about 14 months ago from Sydney to New Zealand, and it had a catastrophic consequence. In fact, many people were seriously injured. They're still investigating what caused that sudden descent. But, there could be several factors. Of course, the most common one is engine failures. I, as a common man, would never like to speculate what exactly it was. Right. But I think it is important for us to, as Suhail said, I'm not going to speculate or even talk about pilot error, because those two pilots were absolutely magnificent. They were highly trained, highly skilled. They had almost in total 10 to 11,000 hours of flying with them together. It wasn't possibly environmental factors. There was no severe weather that was reported, no wind shear, no cold, no turbulence, etc. Yes, there could be collision or external impact, a bird strike, many people say, but then it's rare. Drone collision, rare. Of course, I'm not conjecturing that. Structural failure, catastrophic damage to critical components, yes, you could say that. But I think what I would say as a layman is quite possibly a critical engine malfunction, but then again, there are two of those, right? So it would be exceedingly rare for both engines to fail. Perhaps a flame out, compressor stall, or fuel supply issue, I don't know. But again, the strength of the explosion was because It was loaded with fuel because it was a long-haul flight. But as Suhail said, and I echo with what you said as well, investigators will get to the bottom of it. Today, India grieves, Swati, and it grieves terribly. It's a very tragic day.
Well, Dr. Ranganathan, do stay on with us. We also have Air Vice Marshal P.K. Srivastav here in the studio. Everybody is looking at that video. Air Vice Marshal Srivastav, 59 seconds. That's it. It was all done in 59 seconds. From the takeoff to the crash landing, just 59 seconds. But, you know, in those 59 seconds, there are a lot of versions doing the round on social media, speculations happening on the position of the aircraft, on, what could have gone wrong. There are a lot of theories about tail heavy. I don't understand what tail heavy is. For the, you can throw more light on that.
Swati, firstly, I'm as grieved as anyone, and we are very sad. I've been in aviation for the last 50 years. And I have personally been involved with several aircraft accidents in various capacities. This is one of the most disastrous things we have seen. I agree with Suhail and I agree with Ranga that yes, this kind of thing has happened, and we need to take a deep breath and understand as to the people who are in aviation. They are highly, highly professional people. They don't do anything out of the book. They follow the book very strongly, and every process is practiced and really taken care of. So what can go wrong? You talked about tail heavy. That means probably the CG was not at the right place where it should be. That's a conjecture. Unless we get into the FDR and get into CVR. CVR, I don't think hardly anything would be there, because there was hardly any, except that just before the takeoff. Post takeoff, there was probably the communication which just said Mayday, 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 because there was hardly any time. So if you see, when you take off, when you're taking it off, or when you're landing, both are very critical phases. But when you're taking off, you are better prepared. You're supported by the ground staff. You're supported by the engineers. And before you take your brakes off and let the aircraft roll on the runway, you always see that everything is normal as it should be, because you got the responsibility of so many hundreds of passengers on your shoulders, and you are the one who's taking the aircraft into the air. So all checks, whether it's any kind of check, your instruments, your engine power, everything has been checked before you take the your pedal off and say, okay, let's roll. And after rolling, you just have some 30-40 seconds and it goes down. So whatever any one of us saying on in our private conversations or on TV channels, it's purely a conjecture. And there are several reasons. The reasons we normally classify in pilot error, which I will discount at this point of time. There's no, in my opinion, most unlikely reason is the pilot error. No, it didn't happen. Okay. There's no possibility of that. So that way we can say maintenance error or engineering error. So if we look at that, that also is rare, right? Because when you take over the aircraft and you fly it and it has come from Delhi, the first leg, you would know how the aircraft is behaving. And people posting pictures about air conditioning, posting picture infotainment, they are not at all connected with the safety or the flight pattern of the aircraft. That's not the way. We need our engines running. We need our power. The possibility that both the engines cease together because of bird ingestion or any kind of ingestion is also not there, because at this level, I don't think such big birds are there, because certain tolerances, the word tolerance is there in these engines they can take on. So that possibility, and both going together, both engines flaming out together, it's a rare, one of those rarest of rare things to happen. So now this question remains as to what went wrong. Okay. Did the aircraft stall completely because engines were not there, there's no power and the pilot couldn't do anything, or there was something else? We would need to wait and see how FDR will give you all moment to moment, everything. It will become clear what happened to engine, what happened to pilot, how it all went, and cockpit voice recorder will also be there. So I think as a nation or as a group of professionals, aviation experts, we need to wait for that, get into the depth of the matter, and then only go about speculation. There are many things. We all know what can go wrong, but let's hold our breath.
You agree with Suhail Sir and Dr. Ranganathan that let's not jump to conclusions. Now, we are also joined by Rajiv Pratap Rudy, former Union Minister for Civil Aviation. and we have Gaurav Taneja on the broadcast as well. Very quickly, Gaurav Taneja, have you been able to wrap your head around the fact that it all happened within 59 seconds, that the takeoff takes place, of course, after clearance, after a go-ahead, and then a mayday call from the pilots?
Hey, Swati. First of all, very sad to hear this news. Actually, if you are taking off, the aircraft will show you the message if there is any severe error in the flight or on the systems, and it will ask you to reject the takeoff till there is, like, you have rotated the aircraft off the runway. So aircraft has taken off. That means there was no indication or warning from the aircraft itself. So the pilots continues. If there is any minor warning which does not affect the safety of the flight, takeoff is a critical phase. The aircraft systems inhibit that warning, and it says that, okay, let the pilots take off. This is not anything major. Let him reach a safe altitude of 4,000 or 5,000 feet, and then I will flash him this error so that pilot, if they want to, they can turn back and come and land safely at the departure airport. So there was no such warning at the takeoff. So that means there was no major error in the aircraft or the systems. Aircraft took off. Usually, Swati, anything regular, you just take off, you cross 100 feet or 400 feet, and you put the autopilot on. And in this case, I don't know whether the pilots had the time to do that. The landing gear was up. Usual procedure, you take off, you see there's a positive rate of flying. The other pilot calls that off and he takes the gear up. The gears were left down, indicating that right after takeoff, there was some emergency. The pilots were distracted. They were trying to solve that problem. There was no time or the fall to take the landing gear up because there was no positive rate of flying. The aircraft was sitting down around 400 feet per minute. We have trained in the simulator. We have done so many exercises after takeoff, so many emergencies. We have never practiced a dual engine failure if it is after a takeoff. And once you're taking off from a city that is in the heart of the city, there are buildings in front of you. You can't do anything. If there is a desert or a plain farmland, I can still go and try to land the aircraft on that field, but there's buildings and there's houses and highways. What do? I have no training on that. I have been through such situations. The instructor simulates that just to tell the pilots how scary it can be. And at the end, the pilots, the instructor freezes the sim. And we're like, thank God it's a sim. But what if it's a real aircraft? It's a pilot's nightmare. Both engines are not responding.
Right.
It doesn't seem like a stall because the angle of attack was not that high. It doesn't seem like a compressor stall as far as I can see, because in a compressor stall, you don't lose the entire power. So if you're taking off with 100 and this is 0, if you have a compressor stall, you still get 30% power or 40% power from the engine. The engine doesn't become dead. And if everything goes wrong, the aircraft is still certified to fly with one engine. At least it can circle and come back and land. So it is very unfortunate. Everybody is thinking what has gone wrong.
Absolutely.
Something we have never seen in the aviation industry.
That says a lot, that the experts of the field are shocked. The experts are saying this is an aircraft that has been described as uncrashable. Mr. Rudy, are you also at the moment looking at these videos thinking about the landing gear not being retracted? Are you also looking at the video analyzing, the descent that has happened all of a sudden, the wings? Are you looking at all that, or at the moment you're just, looking at the situation, thinking of those people who've lost their lives and how unfortunate this incident is, and waiting for more details to emerge? Since you know everything about flying, about aircraft, how are you looking at it?
Well, it's horrific to watch the videos even, and the whole aircraft going into a ball of fire. As far as I understand about 787 Dreamliners, it has been part of the Air India fleet and has been across the world for more than 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. It has been a part of the fleet of Air India for a very long time. And possibly, if I'm not wrong, this is the first accident met by a 787 Dreamliner. It has a composite structure. It has very powerful engines. It has an absolute perfect pressurization. It has wings, which is just, it moves up when you take off on lift. So I think technology-wise, it is one of the fantastic machines which is in the air. Now, before I just landed in Patna. I do not know many people know it or not, that I'm also a pilot. I fly big planes, which is Airbus 320s. And while I was taking off from Delhi today, from the cockpit, I witnessed, I was departing on runway 11 left, and I saw just before the departure, before I lined up, I saw a Dreamliner take off from the Delhi airport. And when it took off, it had a gradient, it was full of power, it took off and 15 to 17.5 degrees, it lifted, and as it rolled up, as it accelerated, I could see the wings. It has a very peculiar phenomenon. It's one of those aircrafts where the wings also curls up as you fly. And maybe the difference between when it is looping down and when it flies, it goes up gradually as you pick up. And this is one of the latest designs of an aircraft. So acceleration was there, and I was wondering, and then I compared that to the visuals of what I have seen. I'm not an expert, and I'm not a person who can claim to be having a knowledge of, but there are a few questions which come to my mind, and this aircraft does not fall out of the sky. During takeoff, any alarm is inhibited. That is true for the Airbus. I do not know what is there for the Boeing, but they almost have similar systems. So there are no warnings coming up. Prior to takeoff, you do a lot of checks. You do checks as far as the speed is concerned, rotation check, rotation speed, V1, VR, V2. And once everyone verifies it on its EFB, we call it an electronic flight pack, we compare the figures of takeoff, which is essential to make that aircraft, and we feed it into the computers, and the computers there respond to the information which we have fed into that, and that is how the rotation takes place. Modern aircrafts and modern engines, we do not use 100% power in all the engines which take off across the world. And it is monitored by the manufacturers, and the cost of an engine later and the overall charges all are calculated on the basis of the power which you open on an engine every time an aircraft takes off in India. This is universally known, but not discussed because these are things which are not. So as far as the engines are concerned, it is not necessary that every aircraft which you see of the day takes off on full power of the engine. It can be on reduced power, and that reduced power depends on the length of the runway, temperature, load, amount of fuel, and so forth and so on. And that is the entire calculation done in a computer and fed into the aircraft, and which we cross-verify, the pilot flying, the pilot monitoring could be. I really do not know in this case who was the pilot flying, whether the commander was actually the pilot flying, because most of us, we do not distinguish between a pilot flying and a pilot non-flying. A pilot non-flying could be a senior commander also, and a pilot flying could be a junior person. But there are assigned set of duties between pilot flying and a pilot non-flying. So a junior can also be taking off. Actually, I have not checked up who was the pilot flying in this case. But I presume that the commander who had an experience of 8,000 hours was the pilot flying.
Yes.
When the figures don't match before takeoff, or the figures are not in consonance to the requirement of the aircraft, warnings come up. And you have to correct it, because this, if you have chosen a wrong runway and if you're going on a wrong runway, there are enough indications to show that this information which you have fed is incorrect. Now, I presume that this aircraft which I see starts rolling. It is checked, it gets a clearance from the ATC, it starts rolling, it rotates. Rotation is a point on which, when the aircraft picks up that particular speed, at that speed, we rotate the stick so that the aircraft lifts from the ground, and we have an acceleration height to an aircraft, which is the minimum height required to accelerate the aircraft to a certain point. Now, what I have witnessed, and I have been hearing my senior colleagues and my colleagues, because I'm one of the people who has a lot of interest. I'm the only parliamentarian on the globe who is actually flying big planes. So once what I have noticed, and it is seen, it's a bizarre situation. It can never happen what I'm going to say. It should never happen. It can never happen. So what I'm going to say is possibly which should never happen or cannot happen, or all those experts who can think about it. I'm just wanting to know one thing for sure. When we take off, the first action for any aircraft to be done in the aircraft once we are airborne, the VSI indicates positive climb. So the meter indicates, and we look outside, inside, and we see that we are lifting. And the pilot monitoring says positive climb. And the captain looks to the instruments or whatever he thinks fit, and he says gears up. Now, when he says gears up, that means that is the first call in the aircraft, the moment you lift off, to put back the landing gears back into the cover, and that is the first action.
Right.
And then we keep on accelerating, watch the instrument. Some of the pilots engage the autopilot. People like us also fly, hand fly to a certain 10,000 feet you can hand fly because the FDs are there, you are flying. And because it's a heavy aircraft, most of the pilots prefer to put it on an automation, which they say nav mode. The moment you put it, the automation is there. I do not know whether he put the automation after takeoff at 600 feet. I do not know about the 787, whether 600 feet is or 400 feet, what is their height to put an automation on.
Right.
But assuming that he was still hand flying it, the aircraft had rotated, it had reached a particular height, and what is indicated in the reports, it has reached 635 feet.
Yes.
What people are saying that the gears were still down. Now, when the gears are down, there is a drag. So you want to get rid of the drag immediately, and you just say gears up, and gear up means the tires go inside, and that is the point when the aircraft starts accelerating. I really do not know. And when you are rotating in the initial stages, you have certain flaps. I do not know what is there in the 787. I have not flown it, but there are 15 degrees, 30 degrees, which I saw in the Boeings. But for us in the A320s, we have flaps 1, we have flaps 2, 3, and 4. Usually we take off on flaps 1. So there must be an equivalent of a flap 1 or a flap 2 in a 787, which after we accelerate to a certain height, then we say S speed, which is a speed, which is the minimum speed, and then say S speed, and then we immediately put the flaps back, and the aircraft is in a mode where we can keep on accelerating, and then we clean up the aircraft. That is my submission. Experts can check. I may be completely wrong, and I have told it in what did a mistake happen here? Because this aircraft was taking off. Surat has a reasonably long runway. It was more than 200 tons, more than 50, 70 or 80 tons of fuel in it. And it was going for 10 hours, 9 hours flight to London. So he must have had enough fuel. So roughly it must be with the passengers, with the load. I've just checked with some people, it would be around 200 to 220 tons.
Okay. At
38-degree temperature, which was there in Surat today, then there is no residual power. The calculations will give that with this load, with this load and with this temperature and whatever the ambient conditions are, they would not have additional power in the aircraft, meaning that is a total powered aircraft, which we call TOGA. And maybe we have, which we call flex in the A320s, 50, 55, 60, 65. It is a reduced power which we talk about. Here, I presume, with such heavy load, it must be virtually at full power.
Okay.
And the lift is created. This is one question which I'll ask, position. It cannot happen. It never happens. We are trained not to do that. Did it happen that the pilot monitoring by mistake or whatever put the flaps up prior to the gears up for whatever reason, and because the aircraft was lifting and then it started sliding, there must be a lot of warnings coming up, glide slope or whatever warnings come, and there must have been a startling effect for the captain, because he may never have witnessed such a thing. Whether there was a startling effect, and by the time he would have realized and looked into the components, that was the flaps retracted prior to the
this can't be a flying lesson.
landing gear?
Okay, one second. So you're saying did a mistake? You're saying did a mistake happen there?
I appreciate Rudy's enormous knowledge on aviation, but we are discussing something really deep on this. You know, one minute. And I'm unwilling to...
Because
Sohail.
Gentlemen, I am not an expert. Sohail, dear, my friend, Sohail.
I'm not saying you're not an expert.
Sohail. Oh, Sohail. I'm not saying. Sohail, absolutely. These mistakes can never happen. This aircraft can never fall. There could be n number of reasons. But I am slightly taken, Sohail, because aircraft cannot go down like this.
One second. The Home Minister is speaking. Gentlemen, the Home Minister is speaking.
हुई और कई पैसेंजर इसके अंदर हताहत होने की संभावनाएं हैं। इस घटना से पूरा देश क्षुब्ध है और पूरा देश एक साथ पूर्ण संवेदनाओं के साथ ये जो दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण हादसे में पैसेंजर हताहत हुए हैं, इनके परिजनों के साथ खड़ा है। सबसे पहले मैं भारत सरकार, गुजरात सरकार, भारत सरकार के प्रधानमंत्री जी और गुजरात सरकार की ओर से भी जो लोग हताहत हुए हैं, इनके परिजनों के प्रति गहरी संवेदना व्यक्त करता हूं। 10 ही मिनटों में हादसे के भारत सरकार के पास सूचना पहुंची। तुरंत ही मैंने मुख्यमंत्री जी, यहाँ के गृह मंत्री, होम डिपार्टमेंट के कंट्रोल रूम, सिविल एविएशन डिपार्टमेंट, सिविल एविएशन मंत्री, सभी से संपर्क किया। प्रधानमंत्री जी का भी तुरंत ही फोन आ गया और भारत सरकार और गुजरात सरकार के सभी डिपार्टमेंट एक साथ होकर राहत और बचाव कार्य में लगे। इस विमान में कुल मिलाकर 230 यात्री देश के और विदेश के और 12 क्रू मेंबर सवार थे। इसमें से एक यात्री का बचने का अच्छा समाचार मिला है, मैं उनको मिलकर आया हूं। मृत्यु का आंकड़ा तो डीएनए परीक्षण और यात्रियों की पहचान के बाद ही अथॉरिटी अधिकृत रूप से घोषित करेगी, मगर जो यात्री बचा है उसको मैं मिलकर आया हूं। घटना के तुरंत बाद गुजरात सरकार ने बहुत त्वरा से डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट की सारी इकाइयों को अलर्ट करते हुए, चाहे हेल्थ डिपार्टमेंट हो, चाहे फायर ब्रिगेड हो, चाहे पुलिस विभाग हो, भारत सरकार की भी सीएपीएफ को संपर्क कर सभी ने एक साथ मिलकर राहत और बचाव का कार्य चालू किया। मगर 1.25 लाख लीटर ईंधन विमान के अंदर ही था और लगभग गर्मी तापमान इतना ऊंचा हो गया कि किसी को बचाने की मौका ही नहीं मिला। अब मैं घटना स्थान पर भी जाकर आया हूं। सारे यात्रियों के मृतदेह को बाहर निकालने का काम लगभग समाप्त हो चुका है। जितने यात्रियों के परिजन यहां पहुंच चुके हैं, वो सबका डीएनए लेने की कार्यवाही भी 2-3 घंटों में समाप्त हो जाएगी। विदेश में जिनके परिजन हैं, उनको सूचना देने की कार्यवाही समाप्त हो चुकी है और जैसे ही पहुंचते हैं उनके भी डीएनए सैंपल लिए जाएंगे और मृतदेहों की पहचान के लिए जितने मृतदेह मिले हैं, इनके भी डीएनए सैंपल लेने की कार्यवाही समाप्त हो चुकी है। गुजरात में ही लगभग 1000 के आसपास डीएनए टेस्ट करने पड़ेंगे
ये सभी टेस्ट करने की क्षमता गुजरात में विकसित है, तो डीएनए टेस्टिंग के लिए कहीं गुजरात के बाहर जाने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी। गुजरात की एफएसएल और नेशनल फॉरेंसिक साइंस यूनिवर्सिटी दोनों मिलकर कम से कम समय में डीएनए का परीक्षण पूरा करने के बाद परिवारजनों को अपना मृतदेह परिजन का मृतदेह सौंपने का काम करेंगे। उनके रहने की सुविधा, उनकी सांत्वना की सुविधा, जिनको मेडिकल प्रॉब्लम ट्रॉमा के कारण हुए इनकी मेडिकल की सुविधा, ये सारी व्यवस्था बहुत सुचारू रूप से हो चुकी है। अभी रिव्यू मीटिंग में सारी व्यवस्थाओं को हम सब मंत्रियों ने साथ में मिलकर देखा है। एविएशन डिपार्टमेंट ने अपनी जांच शुरू कर दी है और जांच तेजी से आगे बढ़े इसके लिए भी एविएशन मंत्री जी ने सूचनाएं दी है। मैं फिर से एक बार राहत काम में जिन जिन एजेंसियों ने त्वरा के साथ बचाव और राहत का काम किया, वो सभी का धन्यवाद करना चाहता हूं। और फिर से एक बार जिन्होंने अपने परिजनों को गंवाया है, हताहत हुए हैं, वो सभी को मनपूर्वक संवेदनाएं व्यक्त करता हूं। मैं एक बात जरूर कहना चाहता हूं कि ये एक्सीडेंट है, एक्सीडेंट को कोई रोक नहीं सकता, परंतु 365 दिन 24 घंटा इस तरह की घटना के लिए प्रशासन का जो अलर्टनेस है उसकी कसौटी उसी वक्त होती है जब ऐसी घटनाएं होती है। और आज गुजरात के डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट की तैयारियों का एक प्रकार से दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण तरीके से मगर कसौटी हुआ और बहुत त्वरा के साथ यहाँ पर काम किया गया, वो पूरे देश के मीडिया के सामने और परिजनों के सामने भी आया है। अंत में मैं फिर से एक बार सम्माननीय प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी की ओर से, भारत सरकार और गुजरात सरकार की ओर से सभी हताहत लोगों के परिजनों के प्रति गहरी संवेदना व्यक्त करता हूं। धन्यवाद।
All right, so that was Home Minister Amit Shah, who has met the victims. He's met the survivors as well. Let me, in fact, go across to Mr. Shivaraman, former DGC and Revenue Secretary, joining us on the broadcast. Thank you for joining us, sir. What we're given to understand is that DGCA has now asked Air India to submit a report, a health report of all its aircrafts. Do you believe more proactive measures need to be taken?
See, there is no point in the DGCA asking for a health report on all its aircraft, which the Tata Airlines own now. It's very essential to know the history of this aircraft, particular aircraft which crashed. What is the record of this aircraft from the day it was purchased to the day it has reached its end today? That is very important. And those records must be seized by the DGCA or by the Accident Investigation Bureau. That's very important. Not to now look into the 140, 200 aircraft which the Tatas may be having. They won't have any time to look into it. Now it is essential to look at the details of this aircraft first.
Dr. Ranganathan, your views on the whistleblower accounts that are coming to fore, talking about a foul play.
I'm not aware of any foul play being insinuated as far as this crash is concerned, Swati, I admit. But by all means, I think everything is on the table. The sole eyewitness, in fact, the person who miraculously jumped out of the crashing plane, the sole survivor said that after 30 seconds after takeoff, there was a loud bang and then the plane crashed. Now, of course, that adds to the confusion / speculation, but I think it is too early to apportion is perhaps too strong a word, to talk about or speculate what could be one of the various reasons. I recounted as a layman 3 or 4, Mr. Rudy as an expert and a pilot of large planes recounted a couple of those. But I think this is just too early. We have to wait for at least a week, couple of weeks, perhaps maybe months, in order for us to absolutely know with some degree of certainty as to how a plane that has never crashed before does so within 30 seconds of takeoff. So it is highly unusual. This is not a crash where you could talk about increasing probability of some speculation relative to others, because out here it's pure speculation because this has never happened before. So the conclusion would be all the more complicated and all the more difficult to reach.
All right. Let me first ask you about, the theory that is doing the rounds, Air Marshal Srivastav, about the dual engine failure or the landing gear not being retracted.
Swati, if both the engines have failed for the sake of proposition, or that's what we think, and that's what brought the aircraft down, then just adding to what Mr. Rudy was telling, then you will not be in a position to actually retract the undercarriage, because you have lost the hydraulic power and would not go inside. There are methods, but that happens when you have cruising speed, you are somewhat height, you can go through what they call RAT. But at this height, at this point of time, the non-retraction of undercarriage can also be attributed that if engines are not available, this will not happen. So we have to build a sequence of events. That's what I said in the first time when we talked about it, that we need to wait for FDR analysis, flight data record analysis, and we need to see what happened in CVR, because if there was some communication between the pilots and co-pilots, that will also come in the play, what they call flying pilot, the pilot flying and pilot non-flying. So that would be the real way to investigate. Otherwise, you have so many hypotheses with which you approach, and I fully agree with Ranga that there's nothing which is off the table. Whether it's about baggage being loose somewhere and CG shifting suddenly, angle of attack not being what it is, but as we see in the visuals, it is not violating that as far as the visual estimation is concerned. There's so many things. Everything will be threadbare analyzed, and then you'll put nothing off the table, because if you put anything off the table, and there's a misfueling kind of concept that was the fuel which was put inside, was the right fuel or not, all those will come in play.
I was talking about the whistleblower account. I want to go across Mr. Sivaraman on that, because you said, there's no point in asking for the health report of all the aircrafts. Rather than that, one should look into the history of the aircraft that we are talking about at the moment. The whistleblower account, and I'm talking about Sam Salipur, a Boeing engineer who complained to the FAA in Jan 2024, said Boeing 787 Dreamliner is flawed. He said the risks could be catastrophic as planes age, to quality issues may reduce life of planes. At the moment, should one be looking into this, giving any weightage to the claims that are being made by the whistleblowers, or just wait for the black box to be recovered to know what really transpired?
Swati, this question is to me?
No, that is to Mr. Sivaraman.
Okay.
See, in my view, they have so far not recovered the CVR and the DFDR, as far as I can see from your visuals and from the TV broadcasts. Once the CVR and DFDR are recovered, within 3 to 4 days, it should be possible to decode the DFDR, and then on the simulator, you can fly the flight path of this aircraft which went into disaster. This is what was done in the A320 crash, which occurred in February 1990, when I took over as DGCA. Immediately, we got the DFDR decoded, we put it on the simulator, and we flew the aircraft through a very experienced pilot like Mr. Rudy, And then we found out what was the mistake committed by the pilot in command at that particular point of time. Similarly, in this case also, at least tentatively, we should be able to arrive at a conclusion as to what really happened to this aircraft when it reached a height of 625 feet, when we get the DFDR.
Absolutely.
I don't think it will take months or years to get to a conclusion like that.
Okay, I'm completely out of time, gentlemen. Dr. Ranganathan, just 5 seconds is all I can give you.
Yes, Dreamliner has accomplished 30 million flying hours, 30 million. And it has never had this crash before. And what would compound the problem with even FDR, and of course the expert, Vice Marshal might correct me, is that it's not just that the plane crashed in 30 seconds.
All right.
20 seconds of those 30 seconds, everything was fine. So, you had a window of just 5 to 7 seconds where the pilots detected something was wrong.
Something was wrong. We don't know that. 240 people on that aircraft and 75 who were present in the building have lost their life. And what went wrong is the only question everybody is asking. Perhaps we'll get an answer to that when the investigations proceed, when the black box is recovered. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.